Welcome to the In-Between, where shift happens. This podcast is for anybody who has ever found themselves in that space in between what was and what's going to be. That space where life happens. The moment between where we are and where we're going. That space that is often uncomfortable to sit in. The stuff of life, the ups, the downs, the moments of connection and insight, and the moments where we can't see two steps in front of us. We will ask all the questions, maybe find some answers, and generally work at being okay in the mystery of the in-between.
And so for today's episode, we are talking about the idea that rest is revolutionary. Gasp. Right?
What?
Wow. Rest is revolutionary. So we're going to explore what that means, how it shows up, maybe some of that gasp energy when we talk about rest, or I can't rest, or there's no time to rest, all the things.
Not allowed.
So we're going to be in some conversation about rest and why it's important and why engaging in it is a revolutionary act. And so, as always, the style of this podcast is that I have come with some questions that maybe will direct our conversation, maybe they won't, and we're just going to explore where we go, and that's kind of the idea of the in-between, how life shows up, maybe in ways we expect and often in ways that we don't expect. So,
and Ryan knows these questions, and I do not.
Yes, that is the key, that I know the questions. Dan does not.
Yes.
So we're being sneak on that. Obviously not anything to trip you up or anything, but just so you can have these really in the moment sort of responses, because that's kind of often what we have to do, right?
Yeah. That is the in-between.
The in-between. All right. I'm going to take a breath, because this idea of rest, it's oh no, there's no time to rest. And what kind of spurred this conversation for me was reading some information by Tricia Hersey, who has the Nap Ministry, and it's all about rest. It's all about that rest is this revolutionary act. That rest is resistance, right? Resistance to this shoulds and all the things that we swim in. So
it is protest.
It is protest,
or
right?
Can be, I guess.
Can be protest, yeah. So Dan, in your opinion, what is the importance of rest? Let's just start. Let's just start there, right?
Well, I can tell you for sure. I know the importance of rest when I don't do it.
Yeah.
My relation to rest is, what's rest? No, I used to have this pattern. I've gotten better at it. It still shows up every once in a while, but I used to do this fairly regularly, where I would go and go and go and go and then crash.
Yeah.
Or go and go and go and go and go and then get a cold, or my body was just so tired that the germs get in, and the body has a funny way of you need rest, you're gonna get some rest.
One way or the other, right?
Yeah. And so rest was and when I wasn't aware of this pattern, rest was oh my God, I'm not being productive, was basically the underlying message of I need to be productive. I need to be up and doing things. That's my value. That's where my worth is. I need to be doing and making and producing stuff. And eventually kind of came around to the idea of oh yeah, that's what we're taught. That's what we're told. That's this new expression that everybody's saying, I'm hearing all the time, is the soup we're swimming in.
Yeah.
The soup that we're swimming in right now is, your value, your worth comes from your level of productivity.
Or you can rest when you're dead. That's sort of
right. Yeah. Right. Oh my God. Yeah, that was in the music industry, business, whatever. I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
So icky just to even.
Yeah, especially in college, when it's the grind culture of practicing. There was the gold medal for whoever. I went to college for music, right? And whoever practiced the most got the made up gold medal. Never, right? There was no medal, there wasn't, but that was the thing. It was a badge of pride of oh, who was in the practice room on Saturday? you know, how many hours were you here today? How many classes did you skip to practice, right? Um, and I think that mentality is everywhere. It's in
Mm,
corporate life, it's in family culture. I mean, it's all over the place in definitely in the United States. Um, and so my relationship to rest was stemmed in necessity. I didn't rest until like I had to, and so as this, I don't know, as it kind of went on, like I became more and more aware of like the toxicity of the grind culture,
mm.
how not only not necessary, but how damaging it is to not have rest. And then eventually, more recently, probably within the last like year or two, to have only started to come around to this idea of like, what if I could create a schedule for myself, a life for myself where I didn't have to be at the grind all the time, where I didn't think I had to be at the grind all the time. And rest actually became like a normal thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can take a break and like just not do anything for like half an hour, an afternoon, whatever is needed. And so it really turned into this like deep listening. Like, what do I actually need today? What do
Yeah.
I need right now? And like there have been days where it's just like, and I will recognize like the privilege and the luxury it is that we've been able to create lifestyles where we can just like text each other and be like, today ain't the day.
Not today,
Today.
Satan.
Exactly. Exactly.
But
And
isn't
and,
that
and that
interesting? I
and that
mean, it's
definitely is
that
a privilege, but
yes,
we've
it
been
is.
able to do that most of the time when it's needed. To be like, I can't today.
Well, I think it's like I don't know about you, but it's like I was conditioned not to listen to my own body, not to listen to my needs.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
it
yeah.
was either sometimes it was explicitly and reinforced and some oftentimes implicitly reinforced, but
Yeah.
it's like this idea that my body was not my own, that it belonged to like my job or it belonged to the expectations of others or it belonged to something other than myself so that I
Yeah.
had to um and I know I'm probably not the only one, but to like set aside my own needs and then focus on like being productive or doing this or answering this or after this. And what happened was a complete disconnect with my own body, a complete disconnect with my own needs. So much so that if I was asked, well, what do you need? I don't even know. I couldn't even answer that question. And I think when someone asked me that question, like for the first time, and I couldn't answer it, I was like, oh, woo, woo,
Yeah.
warning,
Alert,
warning,
alert,
warning,
warning.
Um,
Yeah.
so that it is like it is important for me. I'm trying to make, I think that's what you just described as rest being proactive, not reactive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that understanding my own needs, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, and then creating from that space, right? And not waiting till I'm like limping and sniveling and like
Yeah.
exhausted where I can't
Yeah.
even put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And then I decide to rest. But I think you're right. I think it's for me, and I think for a lot of us, it's that productivity is our worth. Hustle for your worth.
Yeah.
You are what you produce. That sort of thing. And it just, oh,
It's rugged
Jesus.
individualism again. Isn't
Right.
that it
And
every time?
when are we gonna get away from that? I don't know. It just seems like as fast as we run, it keeps on following us.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so deeply rooted. The idea of it, the
Yeah,
premise of it is so deeply rooted in like everything. I mean, all of the systems, all of the worldviews, all of the frameworks for life that we are in and a part of and have been for so long. It's all it really is here. It is all rooted in this idea of separation from each other, go it alone, self-reliance, rugged individualism, me and mine. and the grind, and how much of that is rooted in capitalism and white supremacy, and how like these three things just kind of cycle back into each other over and over and over again. It's like, oh, can we please be done?
Yeah.
But I think we are. I think we are like collectively uprooting, digging up,
Yeah.
all like in little pockets, maybe big pockets, medium pockets, whatever, kind of all over the place, starting to dig up all these things. Like, wait a minute,
That doesn't
these
sound
roots
right.
all connect. What the hell?
Well, and I know it's just like we talk about rugged individualism a lot. Conversely, we talk about community a lot.
Yeah,
And so it does
yeah,
seem this conversation around rest and community are like so deeply tied, right?
yeah,
I think you think about a family unit, whether it's a family of origin or chosen family or a social group or a community or a collective of people, especially when people come together, it lightens the load for everyone
mhm,
else, thus creating ability to rest. And I think when we're talking about rest, I mean, yes, sometimes it's like flat out, let me take a nap, close my eyes and
yeah,
go to sleep. But I think often also rest is like taking a pause or not having to work as long, work as hard, do as much that, so I think there's lots of different ways that rest shows up. And it seems
yeah.
like community, how do you think that community is intertwined in this conversation about rest? Because I do think it's pretty sticky in there in this conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a couple of things come up for me, but I think, going back to like you and I specifically have been able to develop a working relationship, and I mean a relationship at many different levels.
Right.
One of those levels happens to be we work together, and because of the relationship that we've built in all of those levels, when it comes to our working relationship, and one of us, texts the other in the morning and is like, nope, not today.
One of those
And
days.
it doesn't happen frequently, but it's we're comfortable enough with each other to be real enough when there is something that's up. Like, today I'm going to do this and this, and I think I'm gonna tap out. Or today I'm all gung ho, getting all this stuff done. Or today ain't it.
Yeah.
Um, I think the community aspect there, and in this sense, community can exist between only two people. Um, that there is an understanding in an openness in that relationship to be like, okay, cool, we'll shift, and nobody dies, nothing explodes. No, like there's no deadlines that weren't ours to make that we couldn't change. Like,
Right.
nothing happened. And yeah, I mean, there are times when there's like an event that has to happen and whatever, but preparation allows us the flexibility to shift and move, because we're rarely are we ever up to the deadline and not ready for something, up
Yeah.
to an event and not ready for it. Because I think, just along with this, along with rest, is proactive operations. Like we operate differently. Like nothing's an emergency, nothing is frantic, nothing is last minute. It's planned, it's easy, it just happened. Like, there's a flow, right? And so,
Right.
like, it ain't it today. I'm not there. And if there is something, we shift, and you do the thing. Like, if I'm not feeling up for it, you do the thing. Or if you're not up for it, I can do the thing. Or the thing just doesn't happen, or the thing moves, or whatever. And it's like, oh, huh, yeah, cool. Nothing happened because of
Yeah.
that. Like, there
Yeah,
was
and I mean, and I
no
recognize.
emergency. We're good.
Yeah, and I recognize, like you say, I mean, that's a privilege that we operate in. What would you say? And then this is not a trick question, but I think this is a really real question is what do you say er, to individuals who are, for example, single parent, 3
Yeah,
kids,
yeah, right,
all the things, like having to be all the things. Like,
right,
how
yeah,
do we find rest in those situations in life. And I think we all are in different situations where rest takes a back seat, or by necessity, there's no way we can rest because there are so many expectations on us from lots of different ways. So, like,
Yeah.
how can we find rest in those times?
Right. Right.
Right. I
Yeah.
think it's,
To amend my previous statement, because definitely a very privileged position to be in.
yeah,
Um, and I think, like, I know for me, I've never had this kind of relationship with like a work relationship, friendship relationship, whatever, that has been this trusting, this open. And so it is for me, like, the example of like, oh, this is what's possible. Oh, it is
mm,
possible. We can. And so I
yeah,
think even just saying it for anyone who's never seen it, never had it, never been in that position, to know that it is possible in the world to create these kinds of working relationships, friendship relationships, family relationship, whatever the type of relationship, it is possible to be in relationship, to be in community with people where authenticity is real and valued and does lead the way and does create opportunities to do things differently.
yeah,
Um, and for all those places where we're not, because I do recognize that I don't have this privilege in every area of my life, and some people don't have it anywhere. I think most of us probably don't have it anywhere. Um, I think the power of community is uh, not being alone in it. Like, you said, like, the single parent thing. Um, I think you find rest, uh, even if you're not a single parent. If you're a parent, period,
yeah,
like you rest while the baby rests. Right, like, I mean, there's definitely it's a hard row, and it is for now,
yeah.
right? I mean, just raising a child is tough, mentally, physically, energetically, spiritually, whatever,
All the things.
all of the things, yeah. Um, and if you are able to find, even if it's a person or 2, to start building a network of community,
Yeah,
I don't know how. I do, I guess. I mean, I kinda did it, but I if we didn't have family around when our son was very little, I have no idea what we would have figured it out. We would have done it, but, um, having that family community to rely on, like, even just to be able to go and work,
yeah,
it's like, "Okay, how do we figure this out? How do we work this out? How do we do this?" And there was such a reliance on that community, and I think that being able to do that does free up time for, like, whether it's going to work or trying to do laundry or grocery shop, or I mean, I remember times where, like, a family member would watch our son so I could go do the grocery shopping, and it was like, "Oh, thank God." I mean, it was, like, the most relaxing part of the week.
going grocery
Um,
shopping.
yeah, yeah, and now I'm like, "Oh god, the grocery store.
Yeah,
Ugh." Um, so I hesitate to use the word, but because I'm so tired of hearing it, but there is an inherent resiliency in us that we can get through the things when we realize it's only for now
yeah,
and it will shift and change and that it can become easier. Um, and I think community allows for an easier experience through those
mm,
things
yeah,
because it makes space.
yeah,
It makes space for going to the grocery store or space for rest or space for whatever. And at the same time, I do have a place in me that envies, like, I don't know, my very, like, fictitious imaginary version of what living in a very tight, like, literal community of people used to be like,
yeah.
where everybody did everything together, kind of, I mean, give or take. you know,
Yeah, but they
everybody
supported
relied
one
on each
another.
other in that
Yeah.
way. It was a totally different thing, right? I think.
Why do you think that this idea of rest, well, just the topic as we presented it, why do you think this idea of rest is so revolutionary? Like, what is it?
Hmm.
Because I find myself, even in my work to like intentionally create space to rest and be proactive and not reactive, I can be resting, whatever that looks like for me, and still back in my mind think, I should be doing this or should be doing that. Or I
Yeah,
find myself justifying into those around me. I did all this work, so I'm going to rest now. Like
I earned
I'm
it. Yeah,
worthy of rest. Look,
yeah,
I earned it. I
yeah,
earned rest. And it's a weird like conditioning that I still
yeah,
struggle with. So why is rest like this revolutionary idea?
yeah. I think there's a lot of self-judgment in it, but there's also this, like, the judgment I make on me based on what I think other people are thinking of
Oh,
me.
I hate that. Yes, that's it. Oh, I hate that. Ugh,
Right? Because
I feel
it's
so
not
called out.
it's not even like, what are other people thinking? It's what do I think other people are thinking?
Yes,
Because who gives a shit what they're actually thinking, right? Like,
I
I think
do. Honestly, I mean, that's what
well,
happens. We do, right?
yeah, yeah, I mean, and we do, but, like, are they actually thinking that?
No.
Probably not. Like, most of the time, probably not. Are there some people who just I make nasty comments and whatever, like, yeah, I can think of some in my life, whatever.
They're probably thinking, "Oh, I wonder what that person they're thinking the
Yes,
exact thing we're thinking.
exactly,
No one's thinking
exactly.
about anybody, right?"
Right, right. Nobody's thinking about anybody except themselves anyway. But yeah, I think that it just, and I never heard this for, early on in my, like, quote, spiritual studies or whatever, right? Like, when I got into the whole, like, deep dive, no one really talked to me about what I think of what I think other people are thinking of me.
Mm.
That's a little bit of a tongue twister, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I always heard, like, the comparison of what other people think. Why does it matter what other people think? Like, that was always the question. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, why do I care? I don't know. Yeah, I do, whatever." But it took work on my own to realize it was more important to me to focus on what I was thinking, the judgments I was making about my own thoughts about what I thought that other person was thinking
Mm.
about me. Right? So I think they're thinking something about me, and then I have some sort of story about what I think that means and why that's important.
Alright.
And then that became the motivation for doing something or not doing something or doing something differently. And actually going back to the raising children, the single parent thing. Um, Now I'm not a single parent, and yet I was the one most of the time at home with our son. And so, um, in-laws can be a very funny thing, right?
Funny, haha.
Mm, sometimes, maybe. No.
Maybe.
Funny, like, yeah, not funny. Um, and I think that's probably true for anybody, because it's just not, in any family, any person grows up in the scenarios they grow up in, and any other family, even the closest, you could live in the same town, same history, same culture, same whatever. It's still you still grew up in a different house, in a different home. Um, and so I think it's really easy with in-laws to be questioned about why certain things. Why are you doing that? And wherever it's coming from, whether it's judgmental or whether it's curiosity, as a new parent, it's really easy to take it all as criticism.
No.
Um, and so I think it became really important to look at. For me, it became really important to look at, do I care that there's criticism? And then why do I care? Like, so if I care or not, that's one thing. Regardless of that, why am I caring? What am I saying to myself about what those criticisms are? And what am I doing? Where does that land? Where does that hit? What experience or story do I have about that, where that matters? And a lot of it is like, you are not enough of a parent. You are not good enough. You don't know enough. You're not whatever. You're not doing enough. You're not there enough. You're not this. You're not that. You're not
Fill
the
in the
other.
blank. Enough.
Yeah. And, like, dude, 95% of that, maybe even 100% of that is not accurate, right? Like, you are being the best parent you can be. Now, yeah, certainly there are, I mean, technically, everyone is doing the best that they can be doing, or else they would be doing it better, right? Uh, and I recognize, yeah, I mean, there are really unfortunate scenarios where, you know, somebody is a drug addict or something and they happen to become a parent, and that's not going to be a great situation, right? So we can kind of put those instances aside. For most people, like, the parenting you're doing is, above and beyond what is the bare minimum needed, you know. So the things that we're trying to, like, run ourselves ragged doing is totally in our own heads for the most part, you know. And so I think community becomes really important, because if we have very, like, open, authentic spaces in those communities, right? So I think this is where maybe for a lot of us, our version of community is requiring some shifting. Like, so I had community around me, but it was definitely not an open space for authenticity or vulnerability. The shields were up all over the place in every direction from every person. And so there were warm bodies that were trusted enough to do things so that we could all coexist and raise a child within some sort of village scenario. Um, I think moving forward, what is being asked of us is, like, if we can create communities where authenticity and vulnerability are the norm, then there gets to be conversation about how we are all showing up,
Mm, yeah.
and how we are all growing as people throughout our whole lives, and how we can collectively decide how things happen and get done, and there's mutual respect across the board because we're all human, right? Like there's a new version of all that can happen, that totally changes how life gets experienced for us, that in the current system of things ain't possible, because of grind, because of
Yeah.
rugged
Yeah.
individualism, because this is the right way, this is the wrong way, I know better, blah blah blah, whatever,
Well,
right?
and in that scenario, rest is the default. Like, it's the thing. It's not revolutionary at that point,
Yeah,
because it has become such the norm. And I think when you said something about enough, it just triggered something, or it activated something in me. That that's it. I think that's why rest, this idea of rest, this idea of intentionally working within our own needs and abilities, and what is good and supportive for us, is revolutionary, because we are screaming, "I am enough." If I lay on the couch all day and watch British
yeah,
television,
that's enough. Yeah,
that's enough. Like, by breathing, I'm enough.
yeah,
By existing, I'm enough. Like, it doesn't matter what I do, it doesn't matter what I say, it doesn't matter how I show up. Intrinsically, I am enough. And that idea, that mentality, that way of thinking and activating in the world is revolutionary, because it is not what we are born into.
yeah,
We're born into X, Y, and Z enough, X,
yep,
Y, and Z raise, X, Y, and Z promotion,
yeah,
accolades, like all the things
yeah,
that you plug in, like, right? And at the end of the day, sometimes we still end up feeling like not enough
yeah,
despite all of that,
yeah,
right? And so then we have
yeah,
it shows up in our bodies, it shows up in our emotions, it shows up in our, our mental health, our physical health, our emotional and spiritual health. That despite all this, and I'm still not enough. Well, damn.
right,
Instead, if we can flip it revolutionary and say, I'm enough, and anything I may do in the world, anyway, it's just like a cherry on top. It's just my
yeah,
gift, right? Because I'm already enough.
yeah,
And I think that for me is why it's so revolutionary. And I don't know, it just seems like so, like, subversive and
yeah,
sneaky
yeah, it
to
does, it
have that
does.
idea, right?
Well, it's like rest becomes, it's revolutionary on multiple levels, and one of them is, like, it's revolutionary to our own system.
Yeah.
Like, for me, like, my whole internal system used to freak out at the idea of rest. You can't take a nap. You got shit to do, man.
In the
What do
middle
you
of the day?
what? Yeah, or like, you can't go out to the movies, you gotta go practice, or you gotta go study, or you gotta whatever. And I remember in college having a professor who was adamant with us about, like, stop feeling guilty when you're in the practice room and wanna be hanging out with the other friends in the dorm, and stop feeling guilty when you're hanging out with your friends in the dorm that you think you ought to be practicing, because you're not going to have a good time doing any of them, and you're not going to get anything done. So
Right.
just spend the time doing whatever, and then figure out how to be.
A balance, right?
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
like, you need to get both. You need to have all of the things. um so I think rest is revolutionary internally. It also becomes revolutionary externally, because it becomes like a symbol. It's like the bat signal for, like, other people of, like, oh, well, for those who are willing to see it. For others, it's like, oh, they're lazy or whatever, I guess. But
Yeah.
um to step out of what was, is a huge, a huge process, but also a huge step to, like, stand up
Yeah.
against that which is not working, you know.
Well, and it shows up kinda like authenticity too, like, if I show up authentically, then I invite you to do the
Yeah,
same. So
yeah,
the same as if I put attention and to rest and what that looks like for me, then I create a little bit of space for you to explore that too.
yeah,
And so when we're all exploring that, it is this sort of kind of communal transformation of the, systems and frameworks that we operate in. I mean, if enough of us say, "No, no, we're not gonna buy into this shit anymore. Productivity is not my worth. I'm not I'm enough." I mean, if enough of us would really, be able to, like, allow that idea to seep into our pores, honestly, it would crumble the systems that we have, and
yeah,
what would emerge
yeah.
is something I don't know that we even have a word for.
Well, and I think a lot of that is because so often we look for solutions to things, but look for those solutions within the same framework that created the issue, right? And so
Yes.
I, for many years, many recent years, was like a proponent of this idea of, like, finding your purpose.
Ooh,
And
that's
it's,
exhausting.
yeah, it is now. It sounds like it now. But man, did I really buy into the idea that, like, the answer to the grind culture was just finding your purpose, because then it's not grind, because then you love what you do and blah 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 blah. But no, like, that's still the grind. That's probably more of the grind, like, convincing enough people to follow their whatever.
It's
It yeah. So you mentioned a
well,
moment ago about, like, flipping the idea on its head, right?
yeah.
Flipping the idea of your worth being in your productivity on its head means we are valuable and worthy without doing anything.
Anything. And I would
Like,
even assert that there is no, like, purpose
right.
of life, that
That
living
is the purpose, to just be here.
to live, to experience, that is the purpose. So, anyone listening, if you are breathing,
Enough. That is
done,
enough.
check,
Yeah.
purpose complete, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing, is, like, we think we have to have and I bought into that too, this making a difference and saving the world, and that's my purpose to uh,
Yeah.
it is, it's just that creating that cycle again of
Yeah.
then that your purpose becomes your worth. And so
Yep.
once again, it's something
Yep.
external that is our worth. Um, and why do you think it's so hard for us to understand our own intrinsic value?
Oh my god, because
I
sit
know
from
that's an easy question to end our time with,
yeah.
but
But from day one, we are taught and shown and probably told that value and worth comes from productivity, comes from what you add the
whatever, yeah.
to whatever, to the family, to the community, to the business to the whatever.
Your contribution to life.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, we literally structured the country around it, right? And then created languaging, the American dream. It sounds so romantic. We love to like over romanticize these ideas. And I think that when it's one of those things that it probably came from a very well-intentioned and great idea.
Yeah.
Like the idea of the American dream, like I think that's probably well-intentioned. It got a little wrought along the way, a little twisted, a
As
little
things do.
misshapen, and you utilized in, I don't know, intentionally, unintentionally, in different ways to manipulate and inspire people in different ways and whatnot. But I mean, the American dream now just seems so ridiculous and unobtainable that it's like, wow, what a dumb idea.
And exhausting too.
And exhausting. Yeah. I mean, it really is. What an exhausting idea, and unachievable at this point. I think for people who look like me, 50 years ago, it was probably easier than for others, but still not possible for everyone, for
Yeah.
sure. Uh, and so I think anything at this point that intentionally works towards something else, towards an alternative, towards a different way, towards doing life in different ways and new ways, um, I think is not only a protest to the systems that harm people and don't work, but also a like consistent march towards something that does work.
Yeah.
So I think it's like it's such a necessity at this point, and we're still constantly surrounded by the message of the exact opposite, right? So I think it becomes super challenging to like remember, like, oh yeah, I am like I'm worth something just from being born,
Yeah.
right? Like, who looks at a newborn baby and goes, "Pfft, worthless, nope, no value there," like
Right.
nobody.
Yeah.
Well, there was that one guy in that one comment online, but other than that guy, I've never met anyone. So I'm not even kidding.
Right.
But other than that one guy, I've never met anyone who has that idea of like babies are worthless. Like, no, everyone else knows. Like, we just absolutely know and understand and appreciate the value of a baby, and then at some point we like age out of that, and
But now you got to prove yourself.
yeah, 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 yeah. But because we are now all well beyond that age, it's just been ingrained in us over
Yeah.
and over, and everywhere we look and everywhere we turn, that message of productivity and worth is just reinforced. So until we can each get enough of these kind of conversations going around us on a regular enough basis to continue reminding ourselves, I think it is a little bit of a challenge. And let's not recreate the grind with it at the same time.
Correct.
Let's not
Correct.
now grind the change.
Trying to change. Well, and each opportunity that we rest, each opportunity that we say no, not today,
Yeah.
or maybe another day, or each, that we pause or whatever that looks like, we are engaging in this revolution.
Yeah.
This revolution that says, no, doesn't work. And then moving in a direction that is supportive of our own needs, and then collectively supportive of changing this idea that our worth is something outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
So we always like to wrap up with like, I don't know, like a takeaway or top three. So today I'm feeling like a top three, because there are lots of ways that we can rest or find that sort of renewal or rejuvenation, and it looks different ways for different people. So I'm curious, your top three ways to rest.
Yeah. The one that comes to mind immediately is most of the things that feel like an emergency are not an emergency.
Mm.
and to simply pause,
Yeah.
take a breath. I mean, isn't that always the answer to something, right? Pause, take a breath,
Breathe.
breathe. Yeah, just slow down. Um, I think rest is proactive and not
Yeah.
reactive, as we might have said 2 or 3 times already. But it's probably not an emergency.
Yeah.
And so pause, stop, breathe, and kind of just assess, like, is this actually an emergency, or can I maybe plan differently for this moving forward? Um, I think taking a nap is also a very obvious answer, but what a profound answer. Like, take a nap, sit down for 5 minutes. Like, really, we can. And also because someone else's emergency is not my emergency. Like, I think a
Mm.
lot of the times that's why it feels like, especially for those of us who are in jobs at somebody else's business, right? And we are often taught to take responsibility for stuff that's not ours. And usually that is in the form of, like, project emergencies, right? Like, something didn't happen the way it needed to because somebody didn't do their thing, and now it's your responsibility, or at least we think it is, or maybe we're told it is.
All right.
Yeah, a nap. Take a nap.
Take a nap.
you know, your lack of
We
planning
turn a
is not my
computer off
emergency.
and on, right?
Yeah.
Reset.
Yeah.
Reset.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing is also, I guess, along with planning, I didn't realize before this conversation how much planning has to do with rest, but I am really realizing that in this conversation. Anyway, I think my number one is, like, not that you have to plan for naps, not that you have to plan for rest, but, like, if you work out of the home, when you come home, take 15 minutes. Just, like, say hi. If you live with other people or you have kids or whatever, come say hi, give your hugs and kisses, do the thing. And then, like, just take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and, like, decompress, rest, breathe. Don't just jump into the next thing. If you work at home, take a time to end your work day, or take a time in the middle of your work day and do the same thing. Like, just take 5 or 10 minutes and just do whatever. Check out, scroll TikTok. I don't know. Do nothing. Read a book. Like, I think having those, like, transition moments is also a really valuable part of rest, of, like, not just going from one thing to the next. My experience of that has been, like, then my time is not my own. I'm
Mm.
always
Oh,
giving my time to something else or someone else. So yeah, stopping, taking a nap, and then, like, intentional transition moments.
I love all of those.
100% all the way.
I love all of this. Well, this conversation has been revolutionary, right?
Indeed.
The mere idea, clutch the pearls that we could actually rest and stop from the grind. And I wanted to leave us, I know we've said lots of things, but I wanted to, like, leave with this quote, and it actually is from Trisha Hersey, and the Nap Ministry,
Mm,
and check it out. It's revolutionary. Her book, Rest is Resistance, revolutionary. And she says, we believe our bodies are portals. They are sites of liberation, knowledge, and invention that are waiting to be reclaimed and awakened by the beautiful interruptions to the brutal systems that sleep and dreaming provide.
mm.
Yeah, like, breathe that in, right? That we are enough. You are enough. I am enough. We are enough so that we can rest.
Yeah.
And until next time, we will catch you in the in-between, where hopefully you take a little rest and maybe a little shift happens.
Welcome to the In-Between, where shift happens. This podcast is for anybody who has ever found themselves in that space in between what was and what's going to be. That space where life happens. The moment between where we are and where we're going. That space that is often uncomfortable to sit in. The stuff of life, the ups, the downs, the moments of connection and insight, and the moments where we can't see 2 steps in front of us. We will ask all the questions, maybe find some answers, and generally work at being okay in the mystery of the in-between.